what happened when you eventually got out?
Oh,
What was life like?
I got out in 2011. I went through the drug abuse program, 9 months of CBT training, therapy, and it was very beneficial. When you choose to apply it, it's very beneficial. I got out in 2011, sent to the halfway house. I was met with my dad. My dad had been doing tax returns because I taught him how to do it. I'm not gonna, no need to fudge on that.
Yeah.
So he had been doing that, and he gave me some money when I got out and everything like that. I was under 3 years probation, could not get a job, so could not touch a computer. The first job, the job that I was in Tallahassee, Florida. My release is, the halfway house is in Tallahassee. My release is in Panama City, an hour and a half away. So on the weekends, I'd come down to Panama City, stay with my dad and my stepmother, and look for a job. And the job that I ended up getting was driving a taxi. Turns out that you got to have a taxi license, but before you get the license, you can work 6 months as a temp before you have to go in and actually get the license. They do not give taxi licenses to felons. So I go in and apply for this job. Turns out that the guy that I was talking to had been convicted years before on some bullshit. He looks at me, he's like, "Look, Brett," he said, "I'll hire you, but you can only work 6 months because they won't give you a license." I was like, "I understand. I appreciate the job." So I drove a taxi for the first 6 months. Loved the job. I thought it was an outstanding job to have. After that ends, I had been living with my dad. Getting out of prison, you don't want people to tell you what to do. You don't. And my stepmom, she was an outstanding woman, but she was a woman that she had rules. And by God, you were going to obey the rules. It didn't matter who you were, how old you were. It's her house. If you're going to live in her house, you're going to obey the rules that are there. And I had curfews and everything else, and I did not like those curfews. So I ended up moving out. And worse, looking back now, is a good mistake, but back then it's the worst mistake I could have made. I didn't have any money. The job was ending. I started to bum money off my dad and my sister because I couldn't get a job. The taxi job ended, could not get a job, so I'm bumming money from my dad, that stolen money that he had, using all that he's got. He's like,
we were talking about before we started the company right down the street.
Yeah,
here.
so
you tried to get a job with them.
Yeah, so
they're a fishing company, right?
They're a fishing simulation company.
Simulation.
They raise awareness on fishing. They do simulation training and everything else to teach you not to fall for
Huge
fishing.
company.
Huge company. And what happens is I get out of prison, I start to apply for jobs. I had job offers from Deloitte to run a cybersecurity or cybercrime office in the UK. Dipshit here thought I could go to the UK and do that. My probation officer was like, "No, you're not going anywhere." So then KnowBe4 offers me a job here in Tampa. He's like, I sent him my resume. 6 minutes after sending my resume, I get a call from this guy, Stu Showerman, the CEO. Back then, they only had 6 employees. Wow. 6 whole employees there. And he has me take the psychological test. He's talking to me. He's like, "Man, we love you." He's like, "We'll start you out as a salesman." I was like, "Done." Go to my probation officer. "I got a job." "Where you got a job?" "Tampa." "You're not going to Tampa." I was like, "What?" He's like, "You're not going. Doing what?" "Fishing simulator." "You're definitely not."
You know they're all
that.
Scientology. They're Scientology owned.
I was about to say that. So Stu, he's talking to me, and he's like, "Now, we're all Scientologists here."
Oh,
Yeah, he tells me this. And I was like, "Seriously?" He's like, "Yeah, do you have a problem with that?" And I was like, "Stu, I don't have a problem with that. As long as you got a paycheck, I'm fine with that." He's like, "Okay." So I couldn't take that job. It gets where I had a couple of payment processors that offered me jobs. So you'd go in the POS terminals, you'd replace those, sell some merchant that. And my probation officer was like, "You want to sell those, do you?" No. So I'm like, okay. So it gets to where I'm trying to apply for fast food. Well, that cash register is a computer. Can't touch that. Okay. What about a waiter's position? No, that's a computer and credit cards, idiot. So couldn't take that. So I was bumming money from my dad and my sister. I was on food stamps so I could eat. I had a roommate that took care of half the rent for me. They tell you when you leave prison, they're like, "Hey, man, find you a job, find you something you care about, you won't recidivate." Well, I couldn't get a job. For what I had a cat. And got to the point I had enough money to feed my cat. Didn't have enough money to buy toilet paper. So I go to the dollar store on the beach, buy the cat some food. On the way out, they had a kiosk there with toilet paper. First crime I committed right there, shoplifting toilet paper. And
They make it as difficult as
It was
possible
bad.
for people
It
to
was
get out of
bad.
prison. I
But-
mean, everyone I've talked to who's done a long time in prison,
It
they
was
always
bad. It was
they
bad.
talk about how difficult it is to get back on your feet.
the problem is that you're released from prison with the exact same tools you go in with.
Less because you can't
And
get
less.
jobs.
And you cannot get a job, and
You
no
can't
one,
rent an apartment.
no one's going to hire you. No one is going to hire you.
Right.
That is a fact, because you've got people out here that have not committed crimes, that don't have the history, that want a job too. So an employer, who the hell are they going to hire? You or this person that's done everything right? So
Yeah, it's
that's
almost
what
like
happens.
that. Our country would rather have people incarcerated than free and have a flourishing society. We'd rather have.
It's bad, man. And the problem is that unless, with me, and I've seen it with other people too, unless you have people that help you, you're not going to be able to make that.
No,
You're
it's
not.
a minefield when you get out.
Yeah, you can't do it by yourself. You can't. You may. I served time with multiple prisons, knew hundreds of inmates personally. I was a social butterfly in prison too, so I encountered thousands of inmates. All those people that I knew, 99% of them, they were just doing their time, and they really had hopes and dreams of getting out and doing the right thing. They did not plan on getting out and breaking the law again. They
Right.
wanted to get out and have healthy relationships, get a good job, do things right. But most of those guys go right back to it because they're not given those opportunities. They don't have somebody like the FBI taking you in and like they did me under their wing
Right.
and giving you references and advice and bullshit like that. They don't have these people who give you jobs that, you've got this history, come and talk to us about that. You don't have that opportunity. And because of that, what do? You've got to eat. You've got to put food on the table. You may call it cognitive dissonance if you want to, but the truth of the matter is that, hey, you're in a country where you've got to survive. And if you can't get a job doing anything, what are you going to do? And that becomes a huge issue.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, that with me, I couldn't get a job. Shoplifted the toilet paper. My wife, Michelle, she meets me right after that. And that was, great, great woman. She, truly, my saving graces are my sister, my wife, and then the FBI. My sister had disowned me, and she comes back into my life after a while. Michelle, she finds me. I didn't find her; she found me, and I was broke, and I was about to lose the apartment. I didn't have much food in the house to eat or anything else, and I ended up moving in with Michelle within 2 months. Didn't get married. Finally, I get a job, the only job I could get. I was on Craigslist, and a guy was advertising for landscaping. I called the guy up, and he's like, yeah, come on down and talk to me. So I drove down to Destin to talk to him. He was running the business out of his house. Him and his brother were. He starts talking to me. He has me start up the weed eater and that shit like that. And about 20 minutes into the conversation, he looks at me. He's like, can I ask you a question? I was like, yeah. And he's like, are you on the run or something? And I was like, no, why do you ask? He's like, you just don't seem like the type of person that would do this. So I told him my history. His name was Dustin Doremus. I told him my history, and he looks at me. He's like, man, I'm going to have to think about it. So I go back home. That was a Friday. I go back home. Sunday evening, he calls me, and he's like, man, if I give you a job, are you actually going to work? And I was like, Dustin, if you'll hire me, I'll work my ass off. And he's like, show up tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. So I go down there. My job was pushing a lawnmower 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, $400 a week. And I busted my ass doing that. I'd hit it hard every day, come home of a night, literally pass out, wake up the next morning, take a shower, hit it again.